Today we take a closer look at what the world is currently focusing on, climate change conference. Scientists say current emission trends could hike temperatures to more than twice that level in the near future. So what will ultimately happen to Earth? Joining us in studio is Jonathan Hoare. He's an environmental head of Eco Solutions. Good morning and thank you for joining us on VUCA Africa. How bad is the climate change problem that we're facing currently?
Well, that's a really debatable, a hotly debated scientific question. Whether emissions are related to climate change or not is still not absolutely clear. There are temperature variations and things that happen naturally, and it's difficult at this stage to conclusively say that our natural or our human-related emissions are contributing towards that climate change. Just at the moment, a debate is on the fact that there's been a bit of a hiatus in terms of temperature increase. Over the last 10 years, it was predicted that the average or the temperature on the ground would increase by 0.2%. It hasn't increased at all. And that's kind of flies in the face in what's been predicted. And this is always the problem with modeling what's going to happen in the future when there's so many variables involved that we can't really predict. So it's, you know, we are definitely contributing towards, we're definitely pushing carbon or CO2 out there, humans are. But whether it's related to or whether it affects climate change is still a debatable issue.
What do we know definitely about climate change and its causes?
That's one of the biggest problems, is we don't actually know anything definitely. You know, we have ideas and there's people who you know, put things forward and this is how it is and that's how it is, but there's nothing definitive yet in terms of the relationship between the two. But saying that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to look for, you know, cleaner or less emissions in terms of our energy production or renewable energy. Just because there's uncertainty doesn't mean there needs to be inertia. Those things, those policies of sustainable energy utilization or renewable energy are still valuable and robust policies all on their own, even if they don't impact on climate change. You know, they still have a value, and that's the way we're moving. It's not really, we don't really need to look at renewable energy and less emissions for saving the world. We need to look at it because we're actually getting to that place where we know how to do those things now, and we have the technology available to us and the will to look for better ways of providing energy for a world, especially developing worlds, and that's why it needs to be done.
Knowing that there's no set story for what's happening with regards to climate change and there's lots of different theories, can you then maybe talk us through the state of the environment both in South Africa and across the world? I know that's very general, but if you can just give us a few definites about this.
Well, South Africa has very good climate and energy policies in place. Its implementation is always the next step. You know, the policies are there and they're good and they're viable, and but the implementation is the steps that have to happen. And I mean, at the moment we're building 2 big power stations, coal-fired power stations in this country, and coal is still going to be the way forwards for a lot of countries, China, India, Africa, because it is, saying it's the cheapest form of energy is difficult because of the long-term impacts or effects of that utilization of coal. You know, what is the actual cost of coal? But at this point, it probably still is our most affordable way forward, especially for developing countries. And that's always been the debate globally, is why you don't always get the buy-in from China and India in terms of these conferences and protocols and things, because they're still developing and they still will be developing on the back of coal predominantly. I mean, there's other alternatives. There's nuclear, there's solar, there's wind, there's those things. But coal is still the way forward, unfortunately, for most of the world.
Okay, you're talking about nuclear as an alternative energy source. South Africa's just signed a multi-billion rand deal with Russia in order to bring nuclear energy power station here. UCT researchers are saying that's unnecessary at this point in time. Is that a correct assumption?
Well, they're saying it's unnecessary for the next couple of years and things. You know, nuclear has its own suite of problems, environmental problems. there's nuclear waste, there's things that have to be buried, there's all sorts of things that have to happen in order for nuclear to work. And a lot of the power stations in America, the nuclear power stations in America, are no longer viable in many respects. They've reached the end of their life, and they're kind of being mothballed. So, I mean, really, the energy that we should be looking at is our solar, our wind, to a certain degree, our renewable energies. But even those have a whole host of their own problems. I mean, wind turbines impact on birds of prey, they impact on bats all over the world. They you know, nothing seems to be free at this stage, and nothing seems to be without its own problems. Wind is 100 years ago, we thought that there was just a bounteous amount of coal and oil and things like that, and we would never reach a point where we ran out. Now we're looking at it and saying, well, there is a chance that we're going to run out, or potential to run out is there. And at the moment, it's a bit like that with wind. Wind seems to be an infinite thing. There's so much wind, we'll always have wind. But wind is, you know, by utilizing wind, if we put wind turbines across oceans in the numbers required to generate real power for big American cities, for example, we'd be drawing off wind. And wind has a purpose in terms of driving our currents, doing all sorts of things. So that draw off of wind, 100 years from now, we might be talking about the problems with our wind farms that are preventing currents from moving up the North American coast and taking warm water through to Europe. And all of those things, we might be faced with the same problems related to wind. So there isn't really a silver bullet at this stage with this is where all our energy should come from. But there are lots of things we can do now, technologies we can use, working towards cleaner, more efficient energy.
Thank you very much. That was Jonathan Hall. He's the head of Eco Solutions, speaking to us about the environment and possible solutions to the problems we face. Let's take you through some of the major stories we'll be updating you on as you enjoy your public holiday, most of you relaxing at home. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is back from embattled Lesotho just in time to address the official National Heritage Day event in the north. We will be live from there this morning. Some parts of Johannesburg are still experiencing water outages while other things are back to normal. Cable theft is said to be the cause of these widespread cuts. We will continue following that story. The TB Joshua building collapse continues as a big story in the country, with the ANC Youth League coming out calling for a visa to be denied for Joshua, who's planning to come to South Africa soon. We're also following that story. India created history today, becoming the first country to successfully get a